Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to explore a truly fascinating historical mystery about an ancient ruler named King Asa. By looking at ancient texts and some incredible modern parallels, we'll see exactly how these sources define peace, especially when you're living right in the middle of chaotic times. I am so thrilled to guide you through this material today because what we're looking at is just a brilliant intersection of historical contradictions and human behavior. Let's jump right in. So we're kicking things off with this classic hymn, God is our refuge and strength. The source material uses this to introduce the whole concept of finding a safe haven. Even when the outside world feels like an exhausting, turbulent battlefield. It sets the stage absolutely perfectly for the historical journey we're about to take. And this brings us to the central question for today. Where does true peace actually come from? Now, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical question. It was the exact, literal question asked by the people of Judah when they finally returned from the Babylonian exile. They came back to a completely chaotic homeland, staring down the barrel of massive social and political rebuilding, and they were just desperate to know how to find stability.
Section 1. Contradictory records in two history books.
Okay, so King Asa is a deeply fascinating figure. Ancient texts claim he defeated this massive invading army of 1 million soldiers, which, let's be real, is a logistical nightmare even by today's standards. Yet despite this monumental victory, his legacy is recorded in two radically different, seemingly impossible ways. And it depends entirely on which ancient history book you happen to be reading.
Just look at this massive clash of historical records. The Book of 1 Kings claims his era was marked by endless conflict, stating literally, there was war, all their days. But then, the Book of 2 Chronicles asserts the exact opposite. It says there was no more war until the 35th year of the reign of Asa. So, what's the deal here? Which one is it? Endless war or unprecedented peace? Well, scholars actually point out that this isn't some ancient typo, but rather two entirely different perspectives. The author of 1 Kings is looking at the outer reality, right? The objective geopolitical landscape of closed borders and tense military standoffs. But the author of 2 Chronicles is looking at the inner reality, the spiritual and emotional landscape of the people. To really grasp that inner reality, 2 Chronicles outlines a very specific chain reaction. See, right after his massive military victory, King Asa didn't just get arrogant. Instead, step 1, he listened to a prophet named Azariah who warned him to seek God. Step 2, this message gave Asa immense courage. Step 3, he used that newfound courage to remove foreign idols from the land. And finally, step 4, he rebuilt the altar. Section 2, Mass Migration from North to South. You guys, the scale of what happened next was just massive. People from the northern tribes, specifically Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, saw that God's presence was with King Asa down in Judah. And in response, they began crossing the heavily militarized border in absolute droves. They completely abandoned their homes up north, migrating south to the kingdom of Judah, driven purely by a desire for religious freedom and to be right where they believed God was present.
Section 3. Amazing parallel with Korean history.
Now, just as the ancient northern Israelites fled south, countless North Korean Christians fled communist oppression during the Korean War. The source notes this truly incredible detail. Before the national division, Pyongyang in the north was actually the thriving center of Korean Christianity. But because of ideological suppression, massive numbers of believers fled to find freedom in South Korea, forever shifting the center of the faith southward. And seeking freedom meant leaving absolutely everything behind. These modern refugees left their ancestral homes, their extended families, the whole shebang, all their material possessions. They braved a literal active war zone to cross that border. They were driven entirely by their desperate, burning desire to just worship freely.
Section 4. Peace enjoyed amidst war.
Let's jump back and look at how those ancient refugees formalized their migration. The Israelites, who migrated south into Judah, made a profound covenant. It echoed the ancient Jewish prayer known as the Shema, from Deuteronomy 6:5, promising to seek God with all their heart, soul, and strength. Now, this wasn't just some casual religious ritual. It was a desperate, whole-life commitment, honestly, much like the Korean refugees who risked absolutely everything for their faith. According to the text in 2 Chronicles, this desperate search yielded a pretty profound result. It says, they sought him with all their soul, and the Lord gave them rest. The ancient author is essentially arguing that because they pursued this deep connection, they were granted true, profound peace. So, returning to our big mystery of the two history books, here is where we find the solution. The outer reality, the one recorded in 1 Kings, was absolutely true. The borders were closed, there was immense political tension, and geopolitical conflict was definitely ongoing. But the inner reality, recorded in 2 Chronicles, was equally true for these refugees. By seeking their faith, they experienced a deep, unshakable spiritual rest. So you've got two seemingly contradictory truths existing at the exact same time.
And returning to our modern parallel, we see this exact same dual reality play out. Incredibly, the very first thing those modern Korean refugees did upon arriving in the impoverished South wasn't to build comfortable homes for themselves. Nope, they built makeshift churches out of literal tents and wooden shacks, where they would gather in the freezing dawn hours just to pray.
Think about that for a second. Surrounded by a devastating war and extreme poverty, their actions illustrated a core belief that true peace comes from God, not from external circumstances. To them, peace wasn't simply the absence of conflict. It was the active presence of the divine in their everyday lives. This historical reality beautifully echoes the words of the Apostle Paul from Philippians chapter 4. He writes about a peace which surpasses all understanding, that will guard our hearts and minds. And you know, it surpasses understanding precisely because it doesn't make logical sense. You can be in a literal war zone or facing a massive personal crisis, and yet internally, your heart and mind are heavily guarded by this inexplicable calm.
Finally, take a look at the deeply moving sheet music for Hymn 412, Wonderful Peace. The lyrics here speak of a deep internal serenity that flows purely from above. Just like the refugees of ancient Israel and the refugees of the Korean War, this hymn reminds us that true peace isn't something manufactured by fixing all our earthly problems. It's something that descends when we're seeking the right source.
We all face our own versions of closed borders and tense conflicts, right? So I want to leave you with a question today. When the world outside your window looks like a chaotic battlefield, where do you actually look for your refuge? Are you reliant purely on changing your external circumstances, or are you seeking a deeper, inner peace, like the figures in our explainer today? Thanks so much for joining me. Keep seeking and keep learning.